The Nintendo Switch is one of the best ways to enjoy incredible AAA Nintendo titles, but preserving these masterpieces for future generations is just as important. That's where emulation comes in. Emulators not only keep these games alive, but also allow you to enhance your experience with better graphics and smoother gameplay. Sounds exciting, doesn't it?
The journey of Switch emulation started with Yuzu, launched on January 14, 2018, followed closely by Ryujinx on February 5, 2018. But there was one big limitation. They weren't available on Android. This was frustrating because mobile gaming is one of the best ways to enjoy Switch titles on the go, just like the Switch itself. That's when Egg NS entered the scene, followed by Skyline, which I personally believe was the best Switch emulator for Android at the time. Then, the game changer happened. Yuzu made its way to Android, marking a massive leap forward for emulation.
With constant updates, Yuzu and Skyline kept pushing boundaries, making more and more games playable. But then, tragedy struck. The announcement of Skyline shutting down hit the emulation community hard, especially for those who loved playing Switch games on Android. It was a sad day indeed.
On the bright side, Yuzu remained strong, delivering daily updates. And soon, hope returned when news broke about a new emulator in development, Stratos. It reignited excitement within the community. But just when things seemed stable again, another blow came. Project Yuzu announced its shutdown, leaving the emulation community devastated once more.
Fortunately, because Yuzu was an open-source project, it paved the way for forks like Suyu, Sudachi, Torzu, and many others. However, even these forks faced shutdowns due to Nintendo's relentless actions. Despite this, the community's determination never faltered, and more forks kept appearing. Uzuy, Nyushu, Xiunx, using the source code of Suyu and Sudachi.
This sparked debates. Some said these forks were just rebrands with no real improvements, while others argued they genuinely enhanced the emulation experience. Personally, I believe some of these forks brought meaningful changes, and I'll prove this in a later video.
While some avoided these forks, others embraced them for their constant updates and patches. Meanwhile, Sudachi resumed development briefly before halting again. And amidst all this, another major setback occurred. The Ryujinx emulator also shut down, leaving many feeling like there was no hope for Switch emulation.
But hope isn't lost. Some forks, like Citron, are still being updated. Based on my research, Citron is actually an updated version of Uzuy. The story behind this rebranding is quite fascinating. The Uzuy Discord server kept getting reported by individuals opposed to Switch emulators, which led to multiple bans. Despite this, the developers didn't give up. They reopened the server and even created a Telegram group. However, the relentless reports continued. Eventually, they decided to rebrand Uzuy as Citron.
It's truly inspiring to see the resilience of the emulation community. Citron's ongoing development proves that emulation isn't going anywhere.
But here's the thing. To truly enjoy the full potential of emulation, you need to understand the settings. Simply copying someone else's setup might not work for you. Why? Because every device is different. Different specs, preferences, and performance capabilities. That's the beauty of emulators. They're designed to adapt to your individual needs.
So instead of blindly copying others, we recommend learning how these settings work and tailoring them to your specific setup. And if that sounds overwhelming, don't worry. That's exactly what we're here for. Hello everyone. It's Kuro here, and today I've got my good friend Violet joining me.
Hi everyone. We're here to guide you through everything you need to know about Switch emulation. This video will be the most detailed Switch emulator guide you'll find on YouTube. By the end, you'll have all the tools you need to master Switch emulators, so stick around till the end.
Violet, are we promising a bit too much here?
Don't worry, Kuro. We've worked hard to make this as detailed as possible. It's going to be amazing.
Then let's start the video with some gameplay test. By the way, we've already uploaded 100 playable games on my channel, so I'll only be showing a few games to keep the video concise.
Today, we'll focus on the positive side of Switch emulators, highlighting games that run exceptionally well. Sometimes, the Nintendo Switch limits the performance of games by capping their FPS or resolution. Even though the hardware could offer more, with emulation, these limitations can often be bypassed, allowing for a significantly enhanced gaming experience. Let's dive in.
Portal 2. This game runs natively at 60 FPS on the Switch, which is already impressive. However, with emulation, you can push it up to 120 FPS if you remove the cap. While 60 FPS is smooth enough for most players, myself included, having the option for higher performance is always a bonus.
Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games. These titles are locked at 30 FPS on the Switch, which feels underwhelming considering their age. These games originally ran on the PlayStation 2, so 60 FPS should have been easily achievable. Thankfully, emulation allows you to unlock the frame rate and enjoy the games at higher FPS, making combat feel much smoother.
Monster Hunter Generations. On the Switch, this game is capped at 30 FPS, which is disappointing given its roots on the Nintendo 3DS. Sure, we get an enhanced resolution compared to the 3DS, but having a 60 FPS option would have been much better, especially since Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, which looks far superior, runs smoothly on the same platform. With emulation, you can unlock higher frame rates, and there are likely mods available to sync gameplay to the increased FPS. This can make your hunting experience far more enjoyable.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Another title locked at 30 FPS on the Switch. Emulation lets you break free from this restriction, significantly improving the overall experience.
Now I can't concentrate on the video. How can I ignore this? Bro's legit fighting with an eagle. Dark Souls. Dark Souls on the Switch is also capped at 30 FPS. If you have a high-end device, emulation can help you push past this cap, delivering smoother performance and enhancing the overall immersion.
Subnautica? This game too is limited to 30 FPS on the Switch. With emulation, you can achieve higher frame rates, making exploration and survival in the depths feel much more fluid. There are many more games where emulation offers better performance than the Switch itself, but we'll save that for another video. For now, let's appreciate how these improvements elevate our favorite titles.
Alright, that's enough gameplay. Let's dive into the settings, starting with one of the trickiest parts, the GPU driver. Stay focused here. By the way, I will explain the settings of forks, since forks have more customization options than others. Uzuy, to be more precise. GPU drivers. For context, devices with Snapdragon processors usually have Adreno GPUs, which can use either the official Adreno drivers or the open-source Turnip driver. On the other hand, Dimensity processors come with Mali GPUs. While Mali drivers aren't as optimized for emulation right now, you can still try them if you're feeling experimental. To check your device's GPU, you can use apps like CPU-Z or search your device's specs online. Types of GPU drivers for Switch emulation. 1. Turnip driver. Open source, compatible with Snapdragon processors, best for high performance. 2. Adreno driver. Official drivers for Adreno GPUs. Works well with specific devices or GPUs within the same lineup. 3. Mali driver. For Mali GPUs and Dimensity processors. Less reliable for emulation, but you can try it out for testing. Why GPU drivers matter. Think of the GPU driver as the translator between the emulator and your device's GPU. It converts the game's graphics into something your GPU can handle, ensuring smooth performance and compatibility. Turnip is usually the best choice for performance, but if you prefer official drivers, Adreno can work well too. Example: for Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 devices, try the Qualcomm driver V74412, extracted from the Xiaomi 14. Personal example: on my Xiaomi Pad 5 with an Adreno 640 GPU, I've had great results with Qualcomm driver V690, extracted from the Oculus Quest 2, which has the same GPU driver. You can also experiment with drivers from the same family, like Qualcomm driver V615.65 for the Adreno 6XX series, meaning any GPU with 6 as the first digit can use this driver. To find the best driver for your device, check GitHub for community-tested driver versions.
Advanced Settings, System Section. Let's move on to some advanced settings that can enhance your gameplay. Limit speed. This setting caps the FPS to stabilize games with fluctuating frame rates. If a game's FPS jumps too much, it can become unplayable, so this setting smooths things out. Limit speed percent. This controls how much you cap the FPS. I suggest capping it at 100% or 120% max. Going beyond that might make the game run too fast, which can spoil the experience.
Synchronize core speed. This ensures the emulated CPU runs at a stable, consistent speed. It helps improve compatibility and reduces performance issues, particularly in games that rely on precise CPU timing.
Docked mode. This setting enables a higher resolution by simulating the Switch's docked mode. However, On Android, you can adjust resolution settings directly, so keep this off for better control over resolution. Emulated region, language, and custom RTC. These settings are straightforward, and you can adjust them based on the game's requirements or your preferences.
Graphics settings. Now let's dive into the graphics settings. Accuracy level. This setting increases the level of accuracy when rendering games. In some cases, you might need to increase it for better visual fidelity. For example, in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, increasing the accuracy level eliminates graphical glitches, making the game look great.
Before diving into the shader backend, it's important to understand how APIs work with emulators. API stands for Application Programming Interface, which is essentially the communication layer between the software, emulator, and hardware, GPU. In simpler terms, the API helps the emulator interact with your GPU. Vulkan. Most modern devices use the Vulkan API, which is faster and more efficient. Perfect for emulation because it allows direct access to the hardware, reducing overhead and improving performance. OpenGL. Older devices often rely on OpenGL. While it's a legacy API and doesn't offer the same performance as Vulkan, it's still usable, especially for devices with less powerful GPUs. You can check which API your device supports by looking up its specifications or using an app like CPU-Z. Vulkan is preferred for modern devices, but OpenGL still works well for older hardware. Shader backend. The shader backend determines how the emulator compiles and processes shaders. These are programs responsible for rendering graphics. Yuzu offers 3 shader backends, each optimized for different systems. 1. GLSL, OpenGL shading language, compatible with most GPUs and OpenGL environments. Works well on older hardware or devices with limited driver support. Downside: slower shader compilation and stuttering when encountering new shaders. Avoid using this on Vulkan-based devices. 2. GLASM, GLSL assembly. Improved shader performance compared to GLSL. Reduces stuttering by pre-compiling shaders more efficiently. Downside: slower than SPIR-V on modern devices, and requires driver support for assembly-level shaders. 3. Standard portable intermediate representation, the best option for performance and stability. Uses Vulkan SPIR-V format, which compiles shaders into highly optimized binary files, drastically reducing stuttering. Ideal for modern GPUs and Vulkan drivers, turnip drivers. Downside: requires Vulkan support, so it might not work well on older or less powerful devices.
NVDEC emulation. NVDEC emulation refers to how Yuzu handles video decoding, the process that occurs during cutscenes, animations, or intros in games. You have 3 options for NVDEC emulation. 1. CPU, decodes videos using the CPU. Pros, works on almost any device. Cons, high CPU usage, which may cause performance drops or stuttering. 2. GPU, offloads video decoding to the GPU, if supported. Pros, lowers CPU usage and provides faster, more efficient decoding. Cons, requires proper GPU driver support, so it's not ideal for Mali devices or older hardware. 3. None. Disables video decoding entirely, so you won't see cutscenes. Pros, reduces system load, improving performance for games that don't rely on cutscenes. You'll miss out on videos, and this can affect immersion in story-driven games.
ASTC decoding method. Before diving into this setting, let's quickly understand what ASTC and RGBA formats are. ASTC stands for Adaptive Scalable Texture Compression, a format used to compress game textures like environments, characters, and other assets, all while maintaining high visual fidelity. The Nintendo Switch's Tegra X1 processor can natively read and display these compressed ASTC textures without additional processing. However, Android devices cannot directly process ASTC textures. Instead, they rely on formats like RGBA, which are compatible with Android GPUs and CPUs. Emulators like Yuzu convert ASTC textures into RGBA format to make them readable and renderable on Android devices. This is where the ASTC decoding method setting comes into play. It lets you choose which part of your device handles the conversion. 1. CPU. The CPU handles the conversion, but it's slower and less efficient than using the GPU. 2. GPU. The GPU takes over the task, offering the best performance because GPUs are designed for these types of operations. This is the recommended option. 3. CPU asynchronously. The CPU performs the conversion more efficiently in the background, but it still doesn't match the GPU in speed or efficiency.
ASTC recompression method. As we've seen, ASTC textures are first converted to RGBA format. After this, the RGBA textures must undergo recompression to optimize performance. This step is necessary to provide you with more options for stability and performance. The ASTC recompression method setting lets you choose the quality of the recompression. 1. Uncompressed. High-quality textures with no compression, but they require more power and memory. BC1. This compresses the textures to low quality, improving performance at the cost of visual fidelity. 3. BC3. This offers medium-quality textures, striking a balance between visual quality and performance.
Resolution. This setting allows you to choose the resolution for your games. Since you're watching this video on YouTube, there's no need to go into much detail. However, keep in mind that increasing the resolution demands more power, which will impact your device's performance.
VSync. Vertical synchronization. VSync synchronizes the frame rate of the game with your monitor's refresh rate to prevent screen tearing. Screen tearing occurs when the GPU renders frames faster than the monitor can display, causing parts of multiple frames to be shown at once, resulting in a jagged tear across the screen. VSync eliminates this by ensuring that each frame is fully rendered before the next one is displayed, leading to smoother visuals. However, enabling VSync can introduce input lag and reduce performance, especially if your system can't maintain a consistent frame rate. Personally, I rarely experience screen tearing or only notice minimal tearing, so I usually keep VSync off. But just in case, here's what these settings do, as I haven't tested every game on every device, and you may find it useful. 1. Immediately off disables VSync entirely, allowing the game to render frames as fast as your system can handle. This may result in screen tearing, but provides the best performance. 2. Mailbox limits the frame rate to match the monitor's refresh rate to prevent tearing. This balances performance and visual stability, but may introduce slight input lag. 3. FIFO, first in, first out, forces the GPU to wait for the monitor to refresh before displaying the next frame. This ensures smoother visuals, but can cause noticeable input lag. 4. FIFO Relaxed, a more flexible version of FIFO. It reduces input lag by allowing some freedom in how frames are displayed, while still minimizing screen tearing.
Window Adapting Filter. This is another texture improving setting. It has 6 levels: Nearest Neighbor, Bilinear, Bicubic, Gaussian, Scale Force, and AMD Fidelity FX. Nearest Neighbor is the default setting, offering basic texture quality. The other options progressively increase texture quality, but note that higher quality textures require more power, which can lead to lower performance. Only increase this setting if your device is capable of handling it.
FSR Sharpness. This setting allows you to customize the sharpness of your game's visuals, ranging from 0 to 100. Higher values will sharpen the visuals, but be cautious as this may impact performance on lower-end devices.
Anisotropic Filter. This setting enhances the quality of textures, especially when viewed at angles or from a distance. It ensures that textures on surfaces like roads, walls, and landscapes retain clarity and sharpness. Here's how the options typically work. 1. Off. No anisotropic filtering is applied, resulting in lower quality textures at oblique angles but improving performance. 2. 2x, 8x, 16x. These levels progressively increase texture clarity and quality, with 16x offering the sharpest and most detailed visuals. However, higher levels demand more from your GPU, which could impact performance on lower-end devices.
Aspect ratio. I only recommend the default 16:9, which is the same aspect you are watching right now. But if you hate black bars so much, you can use stretch to window, and other options aren't worth it. Before explaining the next part, let me briefly tell you what shaders are. Shaders are small programs that run on the GPU to control the way graphics are rendered on the screen. Now let's head to the next setting. Disk Shader Cache. Have you ever noticed that when you run a game for the first time, it performs terribly, but the next time you play, it magically runs much better? Back in the day, I used to think the device needed to get used to it or adapt to its habit, kind of like learning. Turns out, it's not magic. It's thanks to this setting, Disk Shader Cache. Here's what's happening. The first time you play, the emulator compiles shaders in real time, causing stutters and lag. That's where Disk Shader Cache comes into play. This setting saves those compiled shaders to your device's storage, so the next time you play, the emulator doesn't need to recompile them. Instead, it loads them directly from the cache, which eliminates most of the stuttering. So yeah, it's not the device learning like I thought, but it's still pretty cool, right? Just make sure to keep this setting turned on, and you'll enjoy smoother gameplay the next time you load up your favorite games.
Force maximum clock, Adreno only. This setting is a game changer, but also has great risks, just like that dialogue, law of equivalent exchange. This setting will force your GPU to run at maximum clock speed, which significantly increases game performance in the short term. But in exchange, your device will also heat up significantly, resulting in unstable FPS. It's like the rage mode in games. Many people say that Yuzu emulators will make the device heat up like crazy. Well, this is the setting that causes that. I've never used a mobile cooler, but I've heard it's pretty useful in this case.
Use asynchronous shaders. This setting allows shaders to compile in the background, improving performance by reducing stutters. However, it may occasionally cause glitches, as the emulator might use partially compiled shaders temporarily. Despite this, the issue is rare, so you can enable it without much concern.
Use reactive flushing. This setting is designed to enhance rendering accuracy in specific games that rely heavily on precise memory operations. Here's how it works. In some games, the emulator may not immediately detect or reflect changes made to the system's memory, resulting in graphical glitches or inaccurate rendering. By enabling reactive flushing, the emulator actively monitors and updates memory changes in real time, ensuring that the visuals are accurate and behave as intended. However, this process increases the workload on your device, as it requires the emulator to continuously check and update memory. This extra processing can lead to a noticeable drop in performance, such as lower frame rates or increased stuttering, especially on lower-end devices. It's a trade-off between graphical accuracy and performance. This setting is particularly useful for games where turning it on resolves specific rendering issues, like missing textures, broken effects, or incorrect animations. If your game runs well without this setting, it's better to leave it off to maintain optimal performance. Only enable it if you encounter visual problems that cannot be resolved through other settings, and never ever use this setting for fast-paced games if you're not able to handle game FPS properly.
That's a wrap-up of the graphics settings, so make sure to subscribe to this channel, as creating videos like these is very time-consuming, and no one explains these settings in such detail. Now, let's head to the debug section. But before we dive in, I want to mention that this section is primarily for developers. For most users, you don't need to mess with these settings, so let's take a quick look. API, Options. Vulkan, recommended for better performance and compatibility. None disables rendering, effectively making the emulator unusable. You might wonder why the None option exists if it's practically useless for gaming. I believe it's there for diagnostic purposes. Developers or advanced users can use it to isolate issues, such as checking if a game's problem is related to the API. For everyday users, though, this setting doesn't have much practical use.
Graphic debugging. Debugging refers to identifying, analyzing, and fixing errors or bugs in software or systems. When something doesn't work as expected, like a game crashing, graphical glitches, or performance drops, developers use debugging tools to figure out what's going wrong. In emulation, debugging involves examining how the emulator interacts with the game and your device's hardware. It includes analyzing logs, monitoring GPU and API rendering, and detecting incompatibilities or misbehaviors. This setting switches the emulator to a slower debugging mode to help developers track problems. For normal users, there's no need to touch this setting. Keep it off unless you're working with the development team or troubleshooting specific issues.
CPU backend. This setting determines how the emulator processes CPU instructions from the game. Here's a breakdown of the two options. 1. Dynamic, slow, uses dynamic recompilation, or Dynarec. It translates game instructions on the fly, ensuring broader compatibility. It's like having someone translate a book word by word as you read it, slow but thorough. Some games, like Zelda Link's Awakening, may only run in this mode. 2. NC, native code execution, processes instructions directly using your device's native architecture. It's like reading a book already translated into your native language. Quick and straightforward. Use NCE unless the game doesn't run or you're experimenting.
CPU accuracy. This setting determines how the emulator handles instructions with varying levels of precision. 1. Auto. Automatically adjusts the accuracy level based on the game's requirements. Recommended for general gameplay. 2. Accurate. Uses higher precision for better compatibility. Slightly slower performance. 3. Unsafe. Sacrifices accuracy for speed, potentially causing glitches or crashes. 4. Paranoid slow. The highest precision, designed for debugging, not gameplay. Stick to auto for general gameplay. Try accurate if you encounter issues. Avoid unsafe and paranoid unless troubleshooting.
CPU debugging provides detailed logs and information about the CPU's performance, primarily for developers to troubleshoot issues. Most users should leave it off as it can slow performance.
Fast memory. Allows faster memory handling, improving performance. However, it requires enabling CPU debugging, which can slow down performance. When to use? Enable for testing or performance improvements in memory-heavy games. Recommendation: use only if necessary. Otherwise, leave it off.
Finally, let's discuss the manage data part. User data. This setting lets you export your emulator data to different forks, making it a convenient way to transfer data between various versions or variants of the emulator.
Manage save data. This feature is essential because it allows you to save your game data as a zip file using the upward arrow icon. You can share this file with others or import save files from other users using the downward arrow icon. This is particularly useful when switching between different forks, such as Yuzu to Nushu or Uzuy to Citron. Additionally, some games require specific save files to unlock content, making this feature crucial for compatibility.
Install DLC. As the name suggests, this setting allows you to install downloadable content, DLC, for your games with ease.
Install firmware. Firmware is essential for running certain titles. Some users also report that the latest firmware can improve performance, so keeping your firmware up to date is recommended to ensure compatibility and better gameplay.
Install prod keys. This feature lets you install prod keys, which are vital for emulation. To obtain these keys, you'll need to mod your Nintendo Switch and extract them. There are also other methods you might already be aware of.
Install Amiibo. This setting enables the installation of Amiibo data for emulation, allowing you to use virtual Amiibo in compatible games. In some cases, such as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Amiibo keys are mandatory to access certain features, making this setting indispensable for those titles.
Finally, last but not the least, the add-on feature. When you press and hold on a game, you'll see an add-on option. This feature allows you to add updates, DLC, and mods to your games. Updates. Improve game performance and fix bugs, making games more playable. DLC. Unlock extra content, enhancing your gaming experience. Mods perform a variety of enhancements, such as fixing lighting glitches in Dark Souls, removing blur in Zelda Link's Awakening, or even disabling grass in Red Dead Redemption. These mods can be game-changing for certain titles, making this one of the most important settings. And the last thing I want to address before you master Switch emulation is the most common question people ask. What's the best fork, the best driver, or the best settings for this or that emulator? Honestly, my answer to that is, I don't know. The truth is, you need to test these things yourself by understanding what each setting does. Different emulators, forks, and drivers perform differently depending on your device and the games you're running.
Asking for a universal best is not the right approach because it doesn't exist. Emulators and drivers are heavily reliant on individual devices and game requirements. The only way to get the best performance for your unique setup is to learn what each setting does, experiment, and optimize.
All I can do is explain and simplify these settings to help you understand them better. But if you truly want to get the most out of any emulator, you'll need to invest the time and effort to test things yourself. That's the real beauty of emulators. They're all about customization, allowing you to tailor everything to suit your device and preferences.
So, moving forward, avoid asking general best questions, especially to developers. Developers are already busy improving the emulator, and questions like that don't help. They just waste their time and can even annoy them. Instead, ask meaningful troubleshooting questions like, I'm experiencing a blur issue in this game. Do you know how to fix it? This approach is much more productive and helps you learn. Take the time to understand,
experiment,
and troubleshoot. That's how you'll truly master emulation.
Best of luck. Now you're equipped with the knowledge of all the settings, making you a pro at Switch emulation.
Let us know your feedback in the comments. what we can improve, and what you liked about this video.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe to my channel. It motivates me to create more videos like this. If you want to check out 50 playable games I tested compiled into a single video, click here.
Or, if you're interested in a similar guide for Winlator, click here.
Once again, thanks for watching. This is Kuro.
And Violet, signing off.